Hello, everybody. It's Marilyn Harris here of Hard at Work, and I'm doing this podcast series about creating more workplace kindness, better culture, more profits, of course. And when we have teamwork, everything always works a lot better. So my guest today with me is Tara. She is an awesome person. I saw her on LinkedIn, and I just really wanted to have her on my calls. So welcome, Tara.
Thank you.
So tell us, Tara, a little bit about yourself, like how'd you get started doing what you're doing, and go from there.
Sure. Well, I'm a clinical psychologist by training, and I've been doing that for about 20 years or so. I don't even want to admit how long I've been doing it. And I've also been a business entrepreneur. I had my own R&D firm using digital technology to promote health, and now I am at Harvard University's Counseling Center, sort of coming full circle. I joke that my daughters went off to college and I went back to college. So that's what I'm doing right now. I also speak. Recently, it's just a trend. I've been invited to speak about creating kinder cultures in the workplace, and that's been really fun, actually, to talk about what I know and try to share some skills and see if it can be applied to the workplaces. And as you know, I wrote a book called The Kindness Cure, and that is essentially started from my own personal mission, where I asked the question, about 2 years ago, what happened to kindness, because it seemed to really be eroding from our, personal discourse, our public discourse, from our leadership institutions. So I wrote that book, and that's just really kind of the path that I've been on ever since.
Okay, great. You mentioned about going back to college and writing your book and everything. So when you're out speaking with the public or through women business networking groups and such, what are the most highly topics do they really want to know more about from you?
Well, they're usually inviting me because they know that I wrote the book on kindness, and so they already have this intention of how do we bring this into our workspace. Mm-hmm. And it's a question, and it's kind of an ironic one, because at the base level, most people believe that they are kind people. Right. They believe that they are caring and that that's a value that they're promoting, but it's not necessarily something that is enacted in the workplace. And so what I really try to teach is what gets in the way of our natural instinct to be kind and caring. Because we are wired to care. It's very much part of our physiology. We wouldn't be here today, from generation to generation, if we weren't caring at a very primal level. But things get in the way. And so usually the first question I asked, the audience is, what do you think gets in the way? And of course, the most popular answer is stress. And it's true. But what kind of stress? And how does that evolve? And are you even aware when it's happening? Are there ways that you can prevent it from getting in the way of who you want to be as a human being? So then that starts to we start talking about, well, what does it mean to be a kind leader, and where does it need to start, right? Mm-hmm. Is it a ground up? Is it top down? Is it both? So there are really interesting conversations that start to happen around this particular topic. I think the biggest question I got recently, I was at an investment firm, and then I was at an accounting firm, like one of the big five. And this came up twice in both cases where, why is it that women can be so cruel to each other? Right. And, it's one thing to be kind and nice and bring a cup of coffee to a meeting and that sort of thing, but they were really experiencing it, sort of within their own cohort. Right. And to me it's obvious, but to other people it's not obvious. And really it helps to understand actually the science and the physiology of stress. Mm-hmm. And so when we are in environments that are really focused on external criteria, productivity, having to meet numbers. That causes obviously a lot of stress. But when the opportunities for advancement are limited, which they often are in these type of organizations for women, women do what any human being would do, is that they start vying and fighting for their territory, right? And so when we understand that there's a resource issue at hand, that the opportunities aren't there for women, and we need to try to make those opportunities happen so that this kind of sort of mean girl behavior, doesn't sort of self-perpetuate. And it really just starts with a recognition that it's not that people are mean or cruel. You have to actually really look at sort of the cauldron that you are in and try to look at it from that angle as well.
Yeah. I think too, what you're saying is that women and men react to stress much differently. So as you were saying, the women tend to go to the mean girl is because they don't know how to handle that stress. And especially when there's limited opportunities, that's when that mean person comes out.
Well, I think it's I think it's sort of almost a myth that it's a gender issue, because I really actually feel like it's a resource issue. Men have more opportunities to advance themselves, women have less. And so we go to really our basic sort of instinct, right? Is that we're looking for food, we're looking for shelter. I mean, it's very unconscious, and and we have these unconscious drives, and then we also have these unconscious biases. It was funny when I did a talk at one of these places. There was another conference happening down the hallway, and it was all men lining up, waiting to go in, to get their coffee and breakfast and go in. And I'm in the room full of women, and we're looking out the glass doors. And, and I turned out and I looked and I'm like, well, I think we should probably invite the men in too. We could all use some remedial training and kindness, because it does. It's really about intention first. Having sort of an awareness and a recognition of what your values are and how you want to be caring. In an environment that you spend so much of your life.
Yeah. We spend way too much time in the workplace. And then, like you were saying, it's like, I think we also have to be more consciously aware of who we are and what our intention is we set for that day, perhaps. And then when you're in a meeting, you set another intention, so it's really about being ongoing consciously what you're doing and what you're saying.
Yes, I've really come to a place where I think the crisis in kindness is actually really a problem of attention. Is that we're not actually paying attention in the present moment to our own thoughts, feelings, physiology, the environment, because we're so focused on something that's external, right? And and that's because we have this negativity bias. So I teach a lot about the negativity bias, and I don't know if it's come up in any of your interviews, but I feel like understanding that we have this sort of background software system, if you will, in our brains that is constantly scanning our environments for threats. That's what's happening. It's like having this ongoing alarm surveillance system all the time. And so when something that we perceive as stressful or something, externally stressful is happening, our attention immediately goes to that. We can't help it. We have to do that, right? But it's really what happens next. So I teach mindfulness as a big part of my work, and it's really helpful to kind of see following our values and really embodying our values from this place of knowledge about how we as human beings encapsulated, whatever, encased in these human bodies, is that we do a lot of things that are below our awareness. But once we recognize that, our attention has just gone off in this corner, right? That's the negativity bias. We have just had some sort of physiological hit to our system, right? Once we recognize that, that's when we have the opportunity to take a pause and a deep breath, name it, understand that that's what's happening, and then learn how to respond differently. Now, this takes lots of effort and attention, to offset the negativity bias. but it's possible. So I see it as sort of a mind-heart training.
Right, right, yeah, and totally. It's just, to me, it's just being more conscious of what we want, and of course, like as you're saying, is like, we all have our body, our reactions to things could be positive or negative, but that negative part, as you were calling it, is sort of like a software upgrade.
Yeah.
Take an upgrade in our software, in our mind, or in our conscious mind, so that we can shift it back to where we really want it to be, rather than where we are in the reaction mode of it. So.
Yeah, and the significance of this is so important in cultures and in networks, because there's another thing that happens, and again, this is this sort of contagion effect, that we actually all are wirelessly connected to one another,
Right.
through senses and and our physiological transmission, right? And 95% of the stress in the workplace is caused by usually one or two people, like 5%. Right?
Right.
Because negativity has this lightning speed effect. I mean, people can smell stress before they actually consciously are aware of it, and so and so that's where our attention goes. And yet, in lots of these organizations, there's so much good happening too. It just doesn't get recognized, and
Right.
we're not paying attention. But the thing is, there's some of these social networking scientists call this the 3 degrees of influence rule, is that whatever is inserted into a network, whether that's online or offline, and into a social human community, whatever is inserted has the capacity to affect out by 3 degrees. And that, that person that maybe that person knows somebody else, you don't know that person, there's a third person that you don't know. And what that person does and injects into the community can affect you. So that gives us this huge opportunity to be really mindful of what we inject into our communities.
Right. And be really mindful that we are leading with kindness, rather than, the hatred or the meanness or the uncaring aspect of who we are. Yeah. So tell me a little bit more about your book that you written and recently published, and share us
Right.
a little bit about
So, yeah, so that was started from actually sort of, as many books are, from a personal issue or crisis, if you will. My older daughter was entering senior year of high school, and all the kids were out celebrating. We're seniors, and they're out in the woods hanging out where they're not supposed to hang out, but it's tradition.
Yeah.
And she's leaving this gathering, and she gets assaulted by another girl, in fact.
Okay.
Somebody that we knew actually for a long time. And so she gets beaten up while she's leaving. And it was just that event where I just had to sit back and kind of keep my mama bear in check, really.
Yeah.
But I asked myself, what happened to kindness? Like, really, where are we right now as a culture? And is there anything about kindness that we don't know? Like, is there something that we're learning in our modern culture about kindness and compassion that could actually really shift how we go about in the world? So I just started asking the question. And I'm a researcher by trade, and so I just started digging into some of the research, and it was just really fascinating. And then I realized I needed to write a book that was really accessible, that my daughters could understand, and a younger generation could understand, by bringing in sort of the bits and the pieces of the science that really proves out ancient wisdom, right? This is sort of like the ironic part, but there are actual physiological and neurological changes that happen when we practice mindfulness and compassion. There are certain centers of the brain and nervous system activity that gets either amplified or reduced when we start doing these kinds of practices on a daily basis. And it's amazing that you can see this change on brain imaging scans. So, for instance, at a workplace, practicing a loving kindness meditation every day for a few minutes actually shifts employees' well-being, and is sustainable over the long term, even a year later. This is what some of the research is showing. So really, I wanted to create a book that was, hopefully delightful to read, but really started bringing up these basic skills and sort of social and emotional learning that we need to carry on past kindergarten,
Right.
right?
Right.
Throughout our entire lives, because we develop differently over time, and cognitively we need to do different things over time. And so that's why I wrote the book. And it was just kind of like, okay, check that one off the list. I wanted to dedicate a book to my daughters because they have actually been my greatest teachers around this question.
Right.
And we all want love and kindness.
Right.
Every single human being. This is a basic human need.
Right. Right.
And it's a basic human capacity.
Right. Yeah, I totally get what you're saying. So congratulations on writing that book and dedicating it to your daughters. I'm sure that, have they all read it and agree with you, Mom?
Yes, well, because I have a few little stories about them in there, and so I made sure that they read them first and were okay with them, and so I got their seal of approval.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So what type of clients do you like to work with right now, and what kind of services do you provide?
So I have one profession which is working at a counseling center, and that's very specific to that population. I really love actually working with graduate students. So these are our future leaders and lawyers and doctors of the world, who are usually in their mid to late 20s, who are really trying to figure out what's important to them. If they end up at a counseling center, they're in some sort of conflict or struggle. And so I really enjoy that because I actually do teach a lot about the negativity bias and mindfulness. I call it kindfulness, and how to kind of approach your day in a way where you're paying attention to the things that really matter. So that's a lot of my work. In my more private practice and in my speaking gigs, I teach a lot of what I write about in the book. And really I really want people to understand stress as it's sort of a trance that we get caught into. We get sort of addicted to busyness and performance and, ratings and rankings. Like our culture has now conditioned us to these different kinds of values. Right. And we're not sometimes aware of them. And so I really try to teach my clients, which happen to be, women and men, actually. I feel like it's 50-50, which is really delightful because I spent really most of my career with girls, adolescents, and women. But it's about 50-50 now. And usually people who are in transition, they're trying to figure out the meaning in their lives. Are they going to make changes? There might be changes in relationships or work, or there might be a health crisis that's come along. And so a lot of the work is, I joke because there's always three people in the room with me. There's me, my client, and their inner critic. Right. And so a lot of it is sort of like creating a dialogue with the inner critic, right, to really understand how that voice, which is fueled by the negativity bias, is actually mistakenly trying to protect them. Right. And how we can help them let the inner critic go. Right. But when that voice pops up, it just means that there's something that really matters to them in the world. Right. There's something that's triggering them that they care deeply about. And their fear-based voice is popping up to say, oh, watch out, watch out. And so it's really learning how to befriend that aspect. So that's been a lot of my work. It's very enjoyable, and I feel like it's transformational in a very short amount of time. Right. And that's what you want, right? Exactly. Yeah. Yes. Things going ongoing. So tell us, Tara, how somebody, if they want to get you to do speaking for them or work with you, how do they get a hold of you? Oh, well, that's easy. They just need to click the link that has my name on it, taracousineau.com, and I have a speaking tab in my books there. And I created actually recently a new deck, which I love it. It's just affirmations called the Little Deck of Kindfulness. So all of that is on my website, and there's a contact page there, and you can find me on LinkedIn too, and all the social media sites just by looking up my name. Okay, awesome. Well, we'll get that message out to people so they can reach out to you. And thank you for being on the call with me today. I really appreciate you taking your time out of your busy schedule to do that. And thanks for inviting me. Look forward to working with you at some point in time down the road again. Yes, that would be great. Okay, great. Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.